One of those teams in the Midwest making a lot of headlines here to start camp, really the offseason, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's mostly about who's not in camp, and that's Trey Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart, both guys holding out till they get, in Hendrickson's case, a new deal, and in Shamar's case, a deal. So what's the latest on those two situations?
Yeah, so the Bengals do have some optimism about Trey Hendrickson. I mean, they've been talking for a while. They resumed talks back in June. They've been trying to make a push here as camp is getting going. I think everybody's sort of exhausted by the whole thing. The reason why I think something can get done is Trey Hendrickson certainly wants a contract commensurate with his skill set in the market and all those things, but he's not looking to top TJ Watt, or he doesn't need to be the highest paid. I think if he's like top 5 or, somewhere in that vicinity, then he'll be good. So if the Bengals can just get him there and make sure it's a long-term deal, I think it has to be multiple years, then they should be in good shape. And really the blueprint to me seems pretty straightforward. You get Trey in there, and then, Shamar kind of loses his leverage at that point, So if Trey signs, I think Shamar would be right behind him, and then you get both defensive ends for your camp.
I'm going to shift it over here to Seattle. Of course, Noah Fant was released. Were you surprised by this move, and what does that say? What does that say about the Titans that are already here?
No, I actually wasn't at all surprised. That was one of those I was kicking myself I didn't check back in on, just because I was hearing whispers, even around free agency, that they could move him, or that he might even want to be moved, because they weren't going to do a new contract. And then when they drafted Arroyo, it just made sense, because they really liked A.J. Barner. They felt like they had good depth there, and they like to go young when they have the chance to do so. So it only made sense to me. I kind of figured that when I saw that, I wasn't surprised. So, he'll have a home. He's still an accomplished tight end who can stretch a defense vertically. So, we'll see where it goes. And he had a good little run there.
Jeremy, you compiled your top 10 list by position, asking all sorts of people in the NFL what they think about certain players. And the Seahawks had 3 make your top 10 lists. You had Leonard Williams, number 6 defensive tackle, Julian Love, number 10 safety, and Devin Witherspoon, the number 10 corner. In tabulating those results, what was maybe a couple of themes you saw pop up when looking at the Seahawks roster from other voices around the league? For
me, it's a roster that's really solid all the way around. Maybe not high-end star power everywhere, but that's okay. So that doesn't always create a formula for winning, Sometimes it's better to have depth. And I think if you look at a player like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who didn't have a lot of traction on my list for receivers, but you could call him a number 1 guy and be comfortable with that. I mean, he was that kind of producer last year and is trending in that direction. So he's a guy I could see making the list in the future. Problem is, wide receiver is so deep that there are like 30 guys there that you could put in the top 10 and feel pretty comfortable about. But some of it's a case of players taking a little bit of a step back. Kenneth Walker was on the cusp a few years ago or a year ago, and then didn't quite make the jump. So you fall there. Charles Cross, I've been a little surprised he hasn't got a lot of traction. I thought at the least he'd be like an honorable mention type player. Didn't quite get there. So you have a lot of intriguing young players that they've drafted and developed, and you would say, like, they're not busts. They're good players. They just haven't ascended to that top level yet. So we'll see if they can get there. But I expect by this time next year they'll have at least one offensive player in the mix there. And it's tricky with Devon Witherspoon. He had basically a tiebreaker with Jalen Ramsey for that last spot, but teams picked Witherspoon because the versatility, toughness, can play in the slot or on the outside. Kind of a tone setter, and is younger.
Obviously, no one here expected Sam Darnold to make the top 10 list, but what was some of the feedback that you got from Sam Darnold, or about Sam Darnold, I should say?
Yeah, so Sam didn't have a lot of traction on my list as far as the votes go, but certainly there's an acknowledgement that some people around the league do look at him as interchangeable with Geno Smith a little bit. Different quarterbacks. Geno's probably a little further along as like a polished passer at this point, but Darnold probably has a little more upside, and I think for functions of winning and sort of weight class of quarterbacks, they're probably both like right in the middle somewhere, maybe in that 16 to 20 range, as far as the 32 quarterbacks. So you can win with that, and both players have shown that you can have a career resurgence. That's been really cool to see, quarterbacks like that getting big money, getting new contracts, coming off of when it looked like their career might be dead. So, certainly I think the feedback with Darnold is that this is a guy who threw 35 touchdowns last year. I believe that was the final number. Like, that's hard to do. You can't just fall into that, no matter what offense you're in. Even if you have Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell as your play caller, like, you still have to produce, and that's hard to do. And, now I think for him it's more showing a full body of work and that he can overcome last year's struggles late in the year, where defenses maybe figured him out a little bit. Was that the case? Or did he just struggle a little bit and he's going to have maybe more success in December and January this time around?
Jeremy, was there a team or two that when you were tabulating results were getting maybe more positive results than you thought they were going to get at the outset of your survey?
Ooh, surprise teams. Let me see. Not necessarily. I mean, the Ravens had maybe – I knew there was a really good roster, but they had a little bit more than I thought. The Eagles are never surprising because they're loaded at every position. Chiefs were toward the top. The Bucks, I guess, that was kind of a surprise a little bit. The Jets were surprised. They had 4 players in the top 10. If you were to ask me who has the better roster, Seattle or New York, I would say Seattle. But the Jets have more top 10 players than them because Garrett Wilson snuck in there and Sauce Gardner, is still in there, guys like that. Have a couple defensive guys. So that was a team that surprised me a little bit. The Jets have, drafted well, so people are hoping they can turn it around, but they never quite do because it takes more than a few standout players.
Is there a team that you expect to make a bigger jump this year? Maybe it is the Jets. It's crazy when you talk about the Jets because they got names on that roster, but just haven't been able to figure it out. Is there a team that you feel like can make a big jump this year, maybe like a Commander's leap?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, kind of like Tennessee a little bit. We'll see where that roster goes, but I am a Cam Ward believer. I think he's going to have a really good offensive line around him. They've really built that up, and they're saying, hey, we're going to support a rookie quarterback. We got the right guys there. So they spent almost $100 million in free agency and back-to-back first-round picks on the O-line. So it's got to work, and they have Bill Callahan there as their O-line coach. He's one of the best. So I do think the offense will be on the uptick, and the defense there has always been pretty good. So I'm going to say in a winnable division, I'll go Tennessee as sort of my surprise team.
Jeremy, the team that's grabbed the biggest headlines this offseason would be the Steelers in just the names that they've acquired, all household names, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Rodgers, and DK Metcalf. How's the fan base treating those moves? Is it with optimism because of we know what all those guys can look like at their peaks, or is it maybe skepticism since all of them kind of come to Pittsburgh with various question marks? Where's that Steelers fan base right now in viewing their offseason?
Somewhere vacillating between those two. I mean, all the above. I think there's a little indifference to it, a little bit of, is there going to be buyer's remorse here for picking a quarterback that's in his early 40s at this stage, no matter how good he's been? It didn't look great with the Jets, Achilles injury. What exactly are you getting? But then also, I think it's refreshing to some Steelers fans that this is a team that no matter where you are in the pecking order of the NFL, if you're sort of so-called stuck in the middle, you still have to try to build a Super Bowl roster. Like when I talk to people in Pittsburgh, that's what they say. We're trying to win a Super Bowl. We're not hiding from that. So we're making moves accordingly, And this is a team that it's just not going to tank. Like I think there's a appetite with certain fan bases where if you're in the middle, if you're winning 8 or 9 games a year and you're sneaking into the playoffs and you're not winning in the playoffs, they're like, hey, we're stuck. We don't have a quarterback. Let's just tear it down. But then, look at the Giants last year. They have a miserable season, win 3 or 4 games, and then you still don't get the number 1 pick. And a quarterback that only had really one quarterback, which is Cam Ward in that draft, was sort of considered him and the rest. So that often doesn't work, and I applaud the teams that try to go all in. So, and really, I think the Steelers feel like this is their best quarterback outlook they've had since the peak Big Ben years. They've had a pretty ugly carousel of signal callers that haven't worked out.
When you look at this division, a lot of people just put the Rams at the top of the NFC West and say, okay, everyone else figure it out. How do you view it? Do you see the Rams as the clear-cut favorite? Do you think the Niners are close? The Seahawks? How do you look at this West?
Yeah, I don't know if I remember this division being more wide open, because San Fran, to me, is a little bit in transition. They're almost in a mini rebuild where they had to scale back their salary cap in some areas, but they're still heavy on star power, and I'm betting on Kyle Shanahan to get the most out of young players. So they're going to be right there. Seattle, from what I saw from Mike McDonald after the bye last year, he can handle the coaching part. Like, he's a really bright coach. The question is, can he be the sort of leader that they need to be a consistent playoff team? I think he can, but, that's just something he's got to show over time. But they should be right there. Arizona's one of my sneaky contenders. I mentioned Tennessee. I'd go Arizona, too, a little bit. To me, they're on a upward trajectory. And then we know what the Rams can do. And they're replacing Cooper Kupp with Devontae Adams. Most would look at that as an upgrade, combined with a defense that's really good and really young. So right now, if I had to pick a favorite, I'd say the Rams. But to me, it's wide open, maybe more wide open than any other division, in my opinion.
Sticking here in the NFC West, Jeremy, earlier we talked about the Noah Fant release that frees up about almost $9 million in cap space. Do you see the Seahawks using that more on extending guys that are already here on the roster? I know a lot of the 2022 draft class is up for extensions. Or do you think that's maybe money that they could use to go out and acquire somebody to add to this roster?
Well, the Seahawks will always be looking to acquire. I don't know if they're going to make splash moves per se, but they're always looking at depth. And if they can get, quality free agent or a quality kind of low-key trade at a reasonable cost, I think they'll look into that. But that's sort of a case-by-case situation. As far as key players keeping them around, Kobe Bryant comes to mind. I know they have interest in extending him at some point. The safety who's kind of play all over the defensive backfield, but he was in particular a fit for Mike McDonald. I know McDonald really took to him and used him in a variety of ways. And then Tariq Woolen, he's a proven guy, certainly with his length and speed. He's fascinating because he would do really well in free agency. He's the kind of guy that would strike big in free agency, but is he willing to wait a year, or is the cornerback market just too high where Seattle doesn't feel like they can entertain that if he's not a top tier, top 10 guy? Which I would say Witherspoon is kind of there more so than Woolen at this point.
We interrupt my vacation in Phoenix to bring you breaking news here on Seattle Seahawks Today, as your Seattle Seahawks have released tight end Noah Fant, saving $8.91 million against the cap. Tyler Jones, your fearless leader, here with you. Thanks for joining us as we react to this breaking news. Fant signed this contract last offseason. It was a 2-year deal, and the hope was that with the new coaching staff coming in, with changing the offensive structure, that we would see the tight end position more involved. And in the Pete Carroll days, the tight end spot was ignored for the most part in the passing game. It wasn't used like we've seen the elite teams use their elite tight ends across the NFL, whether it's George Kittle in San Francisco or Travis Kelce in Kansas City and Mark Andrews in Baltimore. The list goes on, right? The elite teams have elite tight ends, and they use them quite a bit. It's one of the biggest keys to their success. And when Seattle made this shift, what we were told by Ryan Grubb was, hey, the tight end position is going to be a big key to our passing attack. And we just didn't really see that. Noah Fant's numbers were still similar to what they were previously in the Shane Waldron offense. And the idea that people had with Noah Fant was that, hey, he didn't put up great numbers when Pete Carroll was here, but was that more of the system holding him back rather than his talent level? And last year, with a new system in place, with the new coaching staff, we saw that this was the real Noah Fant all along. He is an incredible athlete. He's got great speed, but just can't put it all together on a consistent basis. We've been doing the Madden sims, and you can see what he's capable of, but he hasn't shown that consistency. You have one touchdown catch in 2 seasons. All right? Now, granted, it's not all his fault, but with that said, it just wasn't working. And so then you take that a step further here. Where does this team go from here? Well, they got 2 young tight ends they believe in. A.J. Barner was better than I think most people anticipated last year as a rookie out of Michigan. He came out as more of a blocking tight end, but showed some surprising ability in the passing game, better than expected. And then you drafted Elijah Arroyo, the second-round pick out of Miami, who I think can be a star in this league and has potential to start week 1 as your tight end 1 now. So I think that there's not going to be much drop-off here. This team's going to be fine with this move. And then you wonder, now you got an additional $9 million to spend. Your cap goes up from $28 million. They had to have opened this money up for a reason, right? And to me, I think there's a very good chance that reason is offensive line help or edge rusher, one of the two. And Uchenna Nwosu is already on the PUP list, so maybe they're evaluating some options to make a move there. You're not going to begin the season just sitting there with $37 million to spend. There's got to be a purpose for why you did this, because you think about when it comes to Sam Darnold, last year, one of the reasons he was successful in Minnesota, everybody talks about Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, but TJ Hawkinson and him had a very good connection. He was extremely comfortable throwing to the tight end position. And so if you're not going to use that $9 million, then in theory, why would you take away a weapon there? There's a purpose here of what they're planning to do with that money, to have something to use for. So we will see what exactly that is. I don't think that Noah Fant is going to be hard to replace. I feel very good about these two tight ends. Elijah Arroyo, I think, has potential to be a star in this league. And the thing, too, that I like is with Arroyo and with what they have in Garner, they do two different things, all right? With Arroyo, you're getting somebody that there's been talk of could even fit the DK Metcalf role of sorts, that you could line him out wide and you could stretch the field a bit. And you don't have a ton of options to be able to do that right now.
The Seattle Seahawks are walking into 2025 without their loudest voices from the last decade. No Geno, no DK, no Lockett. And yet, the team's direction has never looked sharper. There's a new offensive vision, urgency around a young defense, and the expectations. They're not low, just different. Let's unpack where this roster really stands heading into camp. Sam Darnold is no longer a question. He's the plan. This offseason, instead of chasing a splashy trade or forcing a rookie into the fire, Seattle handed Darnold a 3-year deal and gave him clarity. He's QB1, he knows it, and the team knows it. For the first time in years, the Seahawks are building around fit instead of fame. In OTAs, Darnold has looked comfortable in structure. The new offense under Clint Kubiak focuses on timing, short area execution, and post-snap reads. Exactly the kind of game Darnold thrives in when he's not freelancing. It's about him doing what he does well, on schedule, in rhythm, with protection. Forget what you remember about last year's unit. This is a different scheme and a different roster. The tight end room is younger now. Veterans have been let go. In their place, Elijah Arroyo has stepped in, who's flashing as a high upside blocker and seam option. Fullback Robbie Ouzts is also part of the plan. That tells you Seattle's offense is shifting toward physicality. At running back, Kenneth Walker III returns as the starter, but don't ignore rookie Damian Martinez. He's earning excellent snaps, especially in inside zone work. If he continues stacking solid practices, he could force a rotation, not just relief carries. The offensive line remains in flux, but the core is intact. Battles are brewing at center and right guard, and yes, depth is still a concern. The pass-catching group has changed more in chemistry than composition. Jackson, Smith, and Jigba steps into the WR1 role. His route tempo, body control, and hands are drawing consistent praise. Moreover, he's not trying to replace DK's style, but rewriting the structure. Marquez Valdez-Scantling brings vertical stress. Notably, he's been productive enough in limited roles elsewhere, and now has a clean runway in this offense. Now, if we talk about Cooper Kupp, he's a foundational piece of this year's route design. His experience with spacing and leverage is influencing the whole room. Don't expect this trio to lead the league in yardage, but don't be surprised if they turn out to be one of the most balanced receiving groups by October. The Mike McDonald defense is about disguise, aggression, and response speed. And Seattle is building exactly that. Up front, Mike Morris is quietly becoming a tone setter. After missing last year with injury, He's back, and he's flashing interior disruption the team lacked in 2024. The linebacker group remains fluid. There's no Bobby Wagner anymore, but there's urgency in the room. Players like Jamie Sheriff are getting looks, especially on passing downs. In the secondary, Devin Witherspoon leads. He's physical, reactive, and vocal. The cornerback room isn't settled, though. Josh Jobe is a name to watch. He's shown steady growth, but hasn't secured that CB2 role yet. If Seattle makes a move before Week 1, it's probably at the outside corner. Analysts believe they need a coverage piece who can travel with WR1s and allow McDonald to get creative underneath. Seattle didn't hold on to nostalgia this spring. They moved on from high-cost veterans, not to rebuild, but to reset the salary cap and locker room dynamic. And those choices were calculated. They cleared space and got younger. Besides, they chose to keep the locker room intact and hungry. This team seems schematically sharper on both sides. If you're watching every position battle, rising rookie, and every coverage shift, subscribe. We'll be here to break it all down.